Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our round one prop preview for the RBC Heritage. Gonna give you an idea of what to expect from Harbortown Golf Links, the course for this week, how to attack some of the categories there on Underdog and Prize Picks, and then of course a few of the props that I'm taking, a few slips that you might be able to enter there yourself to hopefully go out there and have a profitable Thursday first round of action. But let's go ahead and get this started with a look at the course, which is a unique one. It's relatively short. You can see in terms of its actual true yardage, right around 7,000 yards, but only plays about a quarter of a stroke under par. A lot of that has to do with the small, tiny greens that are also real tricky greens. A peat dye design, and the greens that only measure about 3,700 square foot per green, which, just to give you an idea, the PGA Tour average is right around 6,500 square foot, so nearly 3,000 square foot less than what you're used to seeing on tour, which you'd expect a really low green regulation rate, which of course, if this had any length to it, the green regulation rate would be probably close to 50%, but because it's only about 7,000 yards for a par 71 setup, you still see players go out there and hit a moderate amount of greens. It's still about 6.5% less than your average tour course, but it's not impossible like it could be if it was a little bit longer. Looking at driving accuracy, you also have relatively narrow landing areas. They're about 34 yards wide, and because you have to hit a lot of 3-woods, I'd say driving irons off the tee, the driving accuracy percentage isn't impacted all that much. You can see it's just 2.7% lower than what you're used to seeing. One thing that is important though is there are a lot of overhanging limbs over the fairway. So even when you're in the short stuff, oftentimes you have difficult shots into the green. So not only are you battling small greens out there, but also some real difficult approaches from time to time, depending on your driving accuracy. So last year, a lot of the top end players funneled themselves towards the top of the board, but this time around we have an elevated field. So unlike the last 5 years at the RBC Heritage, we have a major championship sort of field, right? Guys to choose from. So when we get over here to Prize Picks or on Underdog, there's going to be a lot of those John Rahm, Scotty Schefflers to choose from, which is an added bonus for this week. In terms of the weather, we're looking, a little bit, I'd say a little bit too early at it, right? It's still Tuesday, so keep an eye on the forecast. But as of right now, they're calling for it to be relatively blustery. They have about 12 to 14 miles an hour of sustained winds, and then the wind gusts are between the 17 to 22 mile an hour range. Significantly stronger towards the PM, it's worth noting as well, which are going to cause players some issues. That's substantial. It's not anything super severe. You're not talking about an absolute washout there like we've had a few times this year, but certainly on the harder end of the spectrum. I'd say right above average in terms of that difficulty. So when we're taking a look at some of these averages from 2022, you might want to keep in mind that it's going to be a little bit nasty out there, at least for the first round of action. So over here on my Patreon, of course, if you guys want access to all of my picks, that's where I post them. I posted a little bit of a stat breakdown today. So just to give you guys an idea, over here in 2022, you can see the scoring average right around a quarter of a stroke under par. That's where I'm pulling this from. Greens regulation, they hit 11.11 on average. So that equates to this 61.7% rate. They hit 8.86 fairways per round. That equates to the 63.3% rate over there. And your bogeys are worse, which of course is important if they end up posting that over there in Underdog, was 2.85. And birdies are better was 3.48. So when we get over to each category, right, on each site, those are going to be numbers to keep in mind. If you want to compare them to the 10-year average, that's what I posted up here on top. A little bit different, right? So slightly higher fairway average, that's perhaps worth noting. Slightly lower green and regulation average, that's pretty notable. It's about 0.7 lower per round. Scoring average a little bit more difficult. Bogeys per round a little bit higher over the last 10 years. And birdies are better slightly lower. So if anything, we've seen a slightly more difficult course around Harbortown over the last 5 to 10 years as compared to what you saw there in 2022. And with these slightly nasty winds down here, right, that we looked at before, probably going to shade towards that direction. So when we're looking at some of these projections over there on either site, I think we want to consider these historical averages a little bit more than the 2022 ones. So let's take a look at some of the other win sites. You can see well, let's go over here to Thursday. I guess it defaulted back on me. In the morning, calling for slightly lower wins. So I guess if you're going to target any overs for birdies or unders for strokes, maybe make them the morning wave guys. That's typically the case on tour. But in the afternoon, it gets upwards of 11.9. 9. You can see 12.3 there, 12.8 miles an hour. Earlier today, they were actually calling for 15 to 17 miles an hour wind. So again, this is a fluid situation. These projections are going to change wildly throughout the day. So if you're just waiting until before lock to go out there and bet, you probably want to take a look at the projections last second to see if they still look this way, right? If it looks like it's going to be completely calm, then maybe we have to change our approach for how we bet there on Thursday. But as of right now, these are 3 props on Prize Picks that I'm looking at. So over here for fairways hit, it's actually overs I'm looking at. So if we take a look at the projections, right, long term, it's actually 9.23, which was more fairways than last year. And last year played slightly easier. So I think the fairways board is an intriguing spot to take some overs. And the 2 that I want to focus on here, and these aren't the only props that I played here in round 1, are going to be Scottie Scheffler and Patrick Cantlay, who are both currently top 35 on tour when it comes to their driving accuracy. In fact, Scottie Scheffler is number 29, and Patrick Cantlay is number 17 on tour when it comes to hitting fairways, which are 2 surprising numbers. Cantlay has a lot of experience around Harbour Town, a few top 7 finishes, 3 in fact, over the last 4 years. So you know that he has a battle plan for how to attack this course. And Scottie Scheffler, it's his first time teeing it up here. Actually, maybe he has 1 start. I know he doesn't have much experience, if any, but the important part is that he has the length to hit 3-wood on almost every tee, if not a driving iron. And if he has any sort of tactical approach, right, strategic, analytical approach this week, he's going to be hitting a lot of those irons off the tee and hitting a lot of fairways in the process. So I like both of those overs. The field average should be over 8.5. And again, like I said, both are top 35 drivers on tour when it comes to accuracy, which is why I think they're exceptional spots of value. But outside of that, there's a bunch of others that you could take and that I have taken here for round 1 using a similar kind of style. So just do a little bit of research, take a look at some of those fairway makers, and that's a good way to attack that kind of board. Because again, the average is going to be in the 8.8 to 2.3 range. Going over to greens regulation, if you remember, the averages were a little bit lower. Last year it was 11.11, but historically 10.44. So when I take a look at this, I see a lot of unders, right? They have guys at 12.5, but even the lower tier guys are at 11.5 greens, which is well over even the average last year, which was better, right, than you see most years. And with windy conditions, I have to think a lot of unders are going to come through. In this board, I have a ton of unders on. So I'm only going to give you 3 picks for this. Again, I have to keep something behind the paywall, but Sungjae is an exceptional under. He's number 59 on tour right now in terms of green and regulation percentage, which seems respectable, except when you compare him to the other guys at 12.5, right? Tony Finau's in the top 15. Morikawa's top 7. Max Homa, I believe, is top 15 in green and regulation percentage. Rahm, Scheffler, Cantlay are all in the top 5 when it comes to green and regulation percentage. And then there's number 59, but Sungjae. So he's an under that I feel confident taking. Another PM tee time, that's going to have to worry about that. It's worth noting that Cantlay and Scheffler are also going to be in the slightly windier conditions, which is why I don't think they're like absolute locks or nukes or anything like that. They're solid overs, though. But one thing to note is that driving is slightly less affected by the wind than iron play. Irons, you launch into the air, they have a higher apex height. They're not able to penetrate that wind nearly as efficiently as a drive. And as a result, you see it, drops in green and regulation percentage a little bit more so than fairway percentage when conditions get like this. So taking unders on greens and regulation, I think, make a lot of sense. And Sungjae is one of those players. On underdog, there's a ton of value. And just for full disclosure purposes, I have about $500 worth of exposure on Prize Picks and a little bit over $1,000 of exposure on underdog. So I like this board a lot more. And the 2 favorites that I have left are Corey Connors under and Tommy Fleetwood under. If I remind you guys, the birdie or better average last year was right about 3.5, and that's one of the best that we've seen at this course. Typically right around 3 1/3, right? 3.31. These sort of players, like a Tommy Fleetwood, also a Corey Connors, are great players, but they're not known as birdie makers. In fact, both of them are at 3.5 birdies on Prize Picks. So if we went over here, looked at the board over here, let's see. Tommy Fleetwood, Corey Connors, both at 3.5 birdies. They're at 4.5 on underdog, and the average for the field is going to be around 3.5, right? And if you take a look at birdie or better percentage for the year, Corey Connors is having an exceptional start, is still not over this 4.5 mark at normal golf courses, let alone a difficult par 71 like this that only has 3 par 5s. There's going to have windy conditions in round 1. there's a birdie difference between the two boards, showing that value that's to be had there. Yeah, I think these are going to get bumped relatively quick. So I'd hop on them as quick as possible. Same thing with Tommy Fleetwood under. But honestly, I took the unders and birdies are better for like 15 guys on the board. I think almost the entire board I took for unders for birdies or better. So check out the Patreon to see how I approached that with my cards and whatnot. But yeah, those are the props that we're going with round one. Best of luck with your own personal cards. If you want access to all of the write-ups, all of the stats I'm posting for rounds 2 through 4, you can find them on the Patreon page. Make sure to smash a like button on your way out. And I would love to hear your favorite prop on the board. So whether it's on Prize Picks, Underdog, go ahead. Let me know what prop catches your eye the most and why. And like I said, best of luck until next time. Go out there, smash on those slips. Hopefully the Masters was kind to you guys. It was a lot of fun, obviously, to see those two guys going down the stretch, right? Koepka, Rahm, PGA versus Liv. This week, I know it's not nearly as sexy, but we still have an elevated field, and I'll be there in person, taking in the action, doing a little bit of a scouting report there tomorrow. So if you're part of the Patreon page, I'll be posting more props after I check out the course. So that's, of course, something that you might want to be a part of there tomorrow. And we're doing a weekly DFS live stream. That'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern time. If you have any questions when it comes to the prop board, you can ask me any DFS questions there, but also on the prop side, I'll field any questions as well. So stop on by for that. Best of luck, like I said, and I'll catch you guys next time.